So when a couple of months ago we got these really wild polls nationally, polls that had Donald Trump down to Joe Biden by 10 points nationally, by 12 points nationally, there were even a few that said Donald Trump was down by 15 points nationally. I said at the time, whether or not those polls were accurate at the time, and remember, accurate means within the margin of error. So if it says 15, it could really be 8, depending on the margin of error. I repeated at the time, it is very unlikely that on election day, we're going to see a 10-point margin in the popular vote. It's just extraordinarily unlikely. I don't think any of us should be imagining that that's the case. We should imagine it's going to be much tighter, and it means we all have to vote. At the same time, if these polls keep coming out, we can't really ignore them. And indeed, there are now multiple new polls that have Joe Biden up by 12. There is a new Reuters Ipsos poll, which says that Joe Biden leads Donald Trump by 12 points nationally. That's among likely voters, 52 to 40. There's also a new USC poll, which says Joe Biden is up by 12. And importantly, in that one, Joe Biden is polling at 53%. So in both the Reuters Ipsos poll and the USC poll, not only is Donald Trump losing by double digits, but Joe Biden is over 50% support, which is an important metric to keep an eye on. Now, in these polls, somewhere between 3 and 5% of likely voters say they're just undecided right now. Now, I've talked about this before. Who are those people? How could you possibly be undecided at this point unless you've literally not paid attention to politics? And in that case, how likely are you to actually vote? That's a question. If we say the electorate is expected to be about 130 million people, if 5% are undecided, that is 6.5 million voters right now. 6.5 million voters who are looking at this situation and saying, I might vote Biden or I might vote Trump. I continue to be stunned and appalled by that reality. I would love to talk to some of those undecided voters. I invite you to call in. I've not heard from any of them so far. Now, it's really important to remember that a popular vote margin correlates differently to the likelihood of an electoral victory for Democrats versus Republicans. There is a structural imbalance against Democrats where, as you know, sometimes Democrats win the popular vote and don't become president because they lose the electoral college. As I'm sure you remember, unless you're 4 years old, in which case I don't even know that we have 4-year-olds in our audience. In 2016, Donald Trump lost the popular vote by 2.1, but he won the electoral college thanks to 70-something thousand votes in 3 states. Nate Silver from 538 did something important. He crunched the numbers to tell us, given a particular popular vote margin, how likely is it that Joe Biden will win the electoral college? And again, understand that the numbers are skewed in this way because of the urban-rural divide and because of some other sort of base level factors that favor Republicans in the electoral college, even while being at a disadvantage in the popular vote. So if Joe Biden wins the popular vote by under 1 point, his odds of becoming president, of getting 270 electoral votes, are only 6%. If Joe Biden can win the popular vote by 1 to 2 points, he has a 22% chance of winning the electoral college. If Joe Biden matches Hillary Clinton's popular vote win somewhere in the 2 to 3 point range, it is still slightly more likely that Trump wins the electoral college. In other words, if Biden gets a similar margin of victory in the popular vote to Hillary, he only has a 46% chance of winning the electoral college. That's why we all have to vote. Only when Joe Biden's popular vote lead gets beyond 3 points does Joe Biden become the likely candidate to become president. If he wins between 3 and 4 points in the popular vote, he has a 74% chance of being president. And as you can see, if Joe Biden were to get a 6-point popular vote win, the odds of becoming president go above 99%. If in some other universe, Joe Biden actually were to win the popular vote by 10, it would be all but certain that he becomes the next president of the United States. So that's how I would be thinking about the popular vote versus the electoral vote scenario. Now, let's look at Joe Biden's average lead right now, because the 12-point lead is not representative of the average. If you look at Joe Biden's average in all national polls, he's up by 6.9. OK, if Joe Biden were to win by 6.9, as I just showed you, he will almost certainly win the Electoral College, right? Well, yes and no. If he really wins by 6.9, yes. But remember that there is a margin of error here. Now, when you're averaging poll results, you can't just say, okay, Biden's up by 6.9. If the average poll has a 3% margin of error for each candidate, that means maybe Joe's only up by 0.9. There are some complex mathematics involved in figuring out an overall margin of error when you're already averaging poll results, which in and of themselves have margins of error. It doesn't matter. The point is, Hillary Clinton ended up with a popular vote win that was 2/3 the size of what the polling predicted. So let me put it a different way. Hillary Clinton was expected to win by 3 in the polls. She won by 2. That means her real margin was 2/3 of the expected margin. If we apply that to Joe Biden, if we say, okay, Biden is winning by 6.9, but we're only expecting him to win by 2/3 of that, that would be about a 4-point popular vote margin of victory. If that were the case, it still doesn't guarantee victory for Joe Biden, but it certainly starts to look pretty good. What does this mean? This means we all have to vote. That's really all that this means. And even though the popular vote numbers may be looking pretty good, we do have to talk about something that's going on in Minnesota, which is not looking quite so good. One of our sponsors today is Vincero Watches, and they're giving you 15% off everything in the store when you go to davidpakman.com/watch. If you're a guy looking for the perfect way to refresh your style, one of the best investments you can make is in a high quality wristwatch. Vincero is an American company that has made it possible for everyday people to afford a premium watch. Almost everything they sell is within the range of about $200, but it'll look like you spent a lot more. All of their watches are made in small batches from top quality materials, and they just look great. I went on their site and picked out a watch from their Icon Automatic collection. The one I got is in mesh matte black, and I love it. It's simple, sleek, elegant, goes great with just about anything I'm wearing, and I've gotten a ton of compliments on it. You'll get 15% off everything in their store when you go to davidpakman.com/watch, and I've put that link right underneath this video.